Wild card weekend, it gave us at least a little bit of drama. Welcome to a brand new edition of NFL Power Rankings. It is presented by Energizer. Mike, Em, and Eric at home with you, a complete list of the rankings. And there's not going to be a ton of movement over these next couple of weeks because we got a lot of teams that aren't playing. But for complete analysis, NFL.com, you can check out Eric's work there. All right, let's jump right into it because we got a couple one seeds that have been sort of just like all of us, just sitting back on the couch, watching the games, trying to figure out and assess what's going to happen. But the Lions and Chiefs, week off, how do we feel about them based off of what we just witnessed in the wild card round?
Yeah, and obviously both teams getting some players back from injury too. You start with the Lions. We've been talking about that defense needing reinforcements as badly as anybody, even coming off the great effort against the Vikings. So, getting David Montgomery to help the run game probably helps the defense. Terry and Arnold, some good vibes on him. Same thing with Kevin Zeitler, their guard. So getting healthier, you got to like that their chances. But tough opponent with the Commanders, right? They're dealing with a ton of confidence right now coming off their road win. They've had a ton of last-second victories. I think they're going to march into Detroit pretty fearless. So I would say the Lions have a little bit more of a challenge this coming weekend because the Chiefs are also getting guys back. Isaiah Pacheco's healthy. Chris Jones, maybe the secondary is a little sharper too. So I would say with them facing the Texans, Detroit having to face a really tough Washington team, maybe the edge goes to Kansas City in terms of the rest and matchup department.
Yeah, last time we saw Patrick Mahomes throw a touchdown, got to go back to Christmas last year. By the way, really cheesy dad joke, and I'll go down that path with you, and you'll jump on the train with me. Let's get to this here because I do want to talk to you about what I think is the best matchup of the weekend. We got a Ravens team that I would make an argument is the favorite of the field. And I get it, Kansas City fans, Detroit fans can throw some hate my way, but the Baltimore Ravens are playing as well as anyone in the NFL, and they are surging. But the Bills are also in that conversation as well. Based off of what you just saw this past weekend in their games, do you agree with me? Like, are the Ravens, I don't want to say clearly, but I would make an argument they're the favorite in this game, and they should be.
Frightening team, absolutely. You'll hear a lot of people say, hey, this is the real AFC championship game, right? And, you understand why. I might push back a little because I do think Kansas City is sort of sitting in the weeds a little bit and saying, don't forget about us. But I think if you just take the play of the defense alone, right? Baltimore, the first 10 games, averaging 370 yards allowed. They were giving up big chunks of yardage and having to win shootouts or occasionally lose them too, Mike. But now you've seen them shave off about 100 yards a game the last 8, including the playoff win against the Steelers. And so, just their improvement against Pittsburgh alone, but also everything else, the body of work they've shown down the stretch. And, this is the time of year where Derrick Henry comes alive. We would love to see Lamar Jackson have his best postseason ever. Josh Allen obviously has done so much for the Bills, and their defense really responded last week. But yeah, you almost have to feel like there's sort of an edge with the Ravens right now. They're not in the spotlight. They're not the team everybody's chasing like they were a year ago, and they can come into Buffalo, a very confident and very efficient group.
I've heard this before when you got to play a team multiple times in the season. We see that obviously within a division. This is not the case, but this is the second time these two teams will meet. First time, it wasn't all that close, and Derrick Henry was a machine in that matchup. And I always reference, especially when it comes to this MVP conversation, well, let's not forget the head-to-head does go to Lamar Jackson and not Josh Allen. Do we throw the regular season matchup because it was so long ago and because it's the postseason where the brand of football is different? Is it even worth referencing what happened last time?
Yeah, I think both teams are obviously going to start there when their prep work, right? They're going to look back at that game, what worked, what didn't. Certainly for the Bills, the what didn't list is going to be a lot longer, and they've got to find out a way to stop Henry early in the game. That first touchdown run really kind of set the tone for the evening. The Bills were up against it all night. They started pressing offensively. So I think there are definitely lessons to be learned from that game from the Buffalo perspective. Baltimore can't just look at the tape and say, okay, good. We've been rolling. We beat them back in week 4. Everything's good. We're going to do just fine going into Highmark this weekend. Obviously, I don't expect them to do that, and they'll be pretty serious because, look, their recent postseason record has been overall a little bit disappointing considering what we expected out of them. So I think there are sort of takeaways from that game. Buffalo's defense is going to be put to the test, no question about it, and Baltimore's will too. But again, as you said so long ago, how much can we really draw from that game and say is going to extrapolate into this one on Sunday?
I do want to get a little inside baseball with everyone. When Eric does his rankings, there is a living, breathing document that is in a very fluid situation every single week. Monday night, most of it is intact, but then we're waiting for the Monday night results to really fine tune this thing. That was the case this week after watching, what the Rams were able to do against Minnesota. This is my first year on the show. You've been doing these rankings for a while. Is there a path? Let's say Baltimore wins, or one of these teams win, or Buffalo wins. Could we see one of these teams as potentially next week's number one team?
Absolutely. I even wrote, had the Bills not overtaken the Broncos after that kind of slow start there, I was prepared to flip-flop them. I was going to put Baltimore ahead of Buffalo. So, and I also said, even though I left it 3-4, Buffalo and Baltimore, I'm prepared to be very disappointed, or I'm prepared to be wrong next week. So, yeah, there's no question about it.
All right, the Philadelphia Eagles, I think there was a lot of anticipation because of Jalen Hurts, specifically coming off of the concussion, missing some time, Saquon getting a rest, obviously, in week number 18. We'll get the Rams side of this in just a moment, but from a Philly perspective, are there some concerns that you have about this team, even just in terms of general health heading into it?
Well, yeah, and you asked earlier about what the layoff effect might be for teams like Detroit and Kansas City. It certainly felt like there was somewhat of an effect with Jalen Hurts and the time he had taken off before kind of getting in a little bit of a groove, I guess. But still, as you pointed out, overall, I think you'd be disappointed. He took a couple of bad sacks. He misfired, especially on that fake tush-push play action ball that could have gone for a touchdown to A.J. Brown. The passing game was disjointed. Saquon was having a sort of grind out 4- and 5-yard chunks. So, it's good that they got that out of their system last week. Obviously, I think it was a Packers defense that played tremendous defense in that game, but some of it was self-inflicted mistakes. Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about Philly, and this was a team that not too long ago I sort of thought, boy, you could see a path back to the Super Bowl for them. I really thought that everything was kind of lining up. Not getting rid of that opinion now. It just feels like a little bit lower a percentage based on at least what we saw last Sunday. They whipped this Rams team last time. Saquon was a man. He was unbelievable. Maybe that happens again, but it's going to be in stark contrast to most of the game we saw Sunday.
Yeah, that was a road win for Philadelphia right behind me at SoFi Stadium, right across the street from where our studios are. We spent a lot of time talking about offensive players, and I get it, in a lot of ways, they're the biggest stars in the game. Under the radar, and I hate to even classify it that way because he's a real stud on this team. Nakobe Dean, the linebacker for Philadelphia, out for the season, probably going to miss a good stretch maybe of even next season. How big of a blow is that against this Rams offense?
Yeah, I think people outside of Philly may not recognize just what an impact he's made, and his college teammate Nolan Smith both have really taken a big jump up this year. But losing Dean, I think, who had been really an under-the-radar star. I think most people saw what Zach Bond's done this year, and they know what that defensive front and how improved that secondary is. But, Dean really was kind of the glue up front and an emotional leader for them. So it puts more of an onus on their remaining linebackers. Do they sit in nickel? Do they send extra rushers? How do they sort of combat that missing piece there in the middle of their defense?
We will talk about the Rams, the Eagles' opponent, who are 7th in your rankings. The Eagles obviously sitting at number 5, but I want to get to the 6th-ranked team, and that is the Washington Commanders. There's a part of me that says the moment isn't too big for Jaden Daniels, right? Like, that is abundantly clear. It's almost like he doesn't know this is not supposed to look like this when you're a rookie quarterback. Am I right?
I mean, look, if that's what it is, just sort of youthful ignorance or whatever, I'll take it. It's been a blast watching him. And it kind of sort of reminds me a little bit of what we saw down the stretch from CJ Stroud last year. They're different players. I'm not trying to compare their games, but mentality-wise, that equanimity when things aren't going right, you have a quarterback who can kind of flush all that out, whatever bad stuff happened the play before or before that, and just say that the task here is to get this first down, to get this touchdown, whatever you need in this situation. He's just proven it time and time again, Mike. So, I love to watch this precocious passer play, and it's been so fun to see him. And I think that's kind of what they need going into Detroit, right? You have to have that attitude of, we got this. It's all good, right? The world's stacked against us. We'll be fine. And that should scare the daylights out of the Lions. I'm being honest right now.
Jaden Daniels, his name has popped up in this last couple of days, actually a ton, but there's 2 conversations that I've had that really resonate with me. Sunday on the NFL channel, we do game day preview, and Bucky Bucky was in the seat, and he says, hey, I think Jaden Daniels is elite, which made me pause for a minute because I think Patrick Mahomes is elite. I think Lamar Jackson is elite. I think Josh Allen is elite. It's almost like he's already got him in that category. And then on Monday night, I'm working with David Carr, and I asked, hey, like, what do you think of what Jaden's doing? And he felt, and it's the first time I heard the comp, he goes, I think he looks like a younger Lamar Jackson out there. But this is not recency bias, right? Like, are those assessments fair?
I don't know that I'll ever comp one for one exactly Lamar Jackson to anybody, but there are shades of him in his game. Obviously, the thin frame, the ability to throw the ball vertically and throw it a long way, and oftentimes accurate too. I mean, you saw that his first couple throws, the big throws down the field, where you said, "Wow, this kid has got touch, he's got placement, it's all there." I wasn't sure. He's got that thin body, and I wasn't sure how he's going to hold up in the NFL. And he has taken some hits this year, but so did Lamar early in his career, and he's still playing at an MVP level. So who's to say he can't have a similar type of career? I don't know that he'll ever be quite as electric a runner or quite as dazzling a playmaker, but I at least think he's in the same zip code.
Yeah. The one thing, and I turned to David when he said it, and I said, is Jaden ahead of where Lamar was his rookie season as a passer? And without hesitation, he said yes, which, by the way, should scare the bejesus out of the NFL and certainly the rest of those teams inside of that division. Cannot wait for this matchup, Commanders and Lions. That game will be played on Saturday. To the 7th-ranked team, the Rams. My biggest concern with this team is the emotional aspect of this. Now, I live in Southern California. I wandered across the street, obviously, from SoFi Stadium. Monday night's game was played in Glendale because of the raging fires that are happening across this region. They win a game. They win big. The defense was monstrous. There's like that emotional toll. How do you stay up for a game against Philadelphia where you got to go across the country?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. And it's probably impossible to quantify exactly what the emotions of all 53 players and the entire coaching staff, how many of them have been personally affected by the fires, right? I mean, right now they're trying to figure out, can we practice at home this week? So there's a lot hanging over them, family issues, all kinds of stuff that is, just friends and people there that live near them. So all of that, with notwithstanding, if they can kind of turn this into a positive and ride that emotional wave into Philadelphia, I think they'll march in there a very confident group. And I think, having seen how they've played, able to win games in different ways down the stretch too, you factor that in. If it's going to be a low-scoring game, they've had a few of those. If it's a shootout like the Bills game, they've been able to win those kinds of games too. So look, there's the emotional factor. There's also the results, which have been drastically better versus a Philly team that, we're not sure about. Maybe they're great. Maybe they can blow this team out like they did last time. But yeah, being able to kind of harness those emotions and fuel it in a positive way towards winning, maybe that's just the extra little bit they need to get over the hump.
A jump of 5 spots in your power rankings, deservedly so. They now sit in that 7th position. The only other thing that I will add to this conversation, they started the year, they lost 4 out of their 5 games. You and I have been doing this show the entire season. I've liked this Rams team. I look at what happened earlier this season, decimated by injuries. Maybe this is the team that could have been fighting for a number 1 seed had they been healthy really from start to finish. The what-if game, we can play it all we want, but the reality is handle business in Philadelphia. And this is a very different conversation we're going to be having about this Rams squad, who once again 7th in the power rankings. Meanwhile, 8 teams still left in the postseason. Our 8th-ranked team might have put the rest of the NFL field on notice. Who it is and the analysis around that squad is coming up next. Back here on Power Rankings, we talked about some of the premier teams. Let's just kind of recap where we are currently sitting. Number 1, it's the Chiefs, the Lions at 2, the Bills sitting at 3, and the Ravens at 4. Cannot wait for that matchup on Sunday. Meanwhile, the 5th-ranked team are the Eagles, the Commanders at 6, the Rams at 7, and the Houston Texans at 8. It's time for Power Moves. It's presented by Energizer. That 8th-ranked team, the Houston Texans, a quantum leap here, moving up 6 spots in the power rankings. Where has this team been the entire season? That's a pretty impressive showing, especially on the defensive side.
Yeah, I guess it is best to play your best ball in January, right? Store up whatever you've been missing all season long. And credit to them, right? That's 2 years in a row where I think the defense has really kind of set the stage. Everyone doubting the Texans coming into that early Saturday wildcard game, and they just came after Justin Herbert and made life miserable for him. And really, that pass rush is, I think, the one thing. I shouldn't say the one thing because CJ Stroud played a really good game too, but that combination, the Texans pass rush, we know how good those guys are. Will Anderson seems like a man on a mission right now. But good play from Stroud and those guys getting after Mahomes. That may be the formula to pull the upset. It was a one-score game the last time they played, so we can't just dismiss them completely and say they have no chance going into Arrowhead. But they took the big leap, obviously, because of the playoff win. They're in the Final Eight now. Maybe there's some teams below that have better regular seasons, but we're in playoff mode, baby. You gotta win to get in that top quartile.
Absolutely. You think Joe Mixon needs to have more of a focus in this offense early in the game?
He could. It would be a great way to kind of take the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands, get that run game going. They've so badly had offensive line issues and everything else, and just try to get Stroud settled in there. So, yeah, if they can find a way to get him loose early and not have to sort of build him up to a big game, I think that would do wonders for them.
All right, let's rip through some of the rankings of the teams that are on the outside looking in. Almost kind of surprised here, the Vikings sitting at number 9. They dropped 3 spots. The way they've looked the last 2 weeks, certainly tough for that fan base. At 10, it's the Bucs, who lose a heartbreaker against those Commanders. 11, it's the Packers, the Broncos at 12, Steelers and Chargers sitting at 13 and 14. Boy, the Chargers dropping 5 spots in your rankings. All right, with Minnesota losing the way that they did, what am I supposed to make of this season? 14 regular season wins, that's awesome. But the way it closes out, tough loss. They could have been a 1 seed. They lose against Detroit. And then the way it looked against the Rams, I got to be honest with you, Eric, there were moments in this game I was cringing for Sam Darnold.
It just never looked right. He never had it. Kevin O'Connell, who's been terrific this season, I think he's a top 5 head coach in this league, called maybe one of his worst games too. So I don't want to just put it all on Sam. The offensive line was overwhelmed. They really didn't have a chance. But at the same time, it's hard not to look at this giant disappointment, this 14-win disappointment. They only lost to 2 teams this year, Mike. I mean, it was the Rams and Eagles. That's it. Yeah. They've beat everybody else. They took care of business. They won 9 straight. This was a tremendous football team that made strides on offense with Darnold to the point where we were wondering, is he going to be back next year? Is he going to earn a long-term deal from the Vikings? The defense, Brian Flores, I mean, both units playing so well, even special teams too. And then everything seemed to collapse, as you said, the past 2 weeks. Real narrative changer, too. I mean, we can't have a Darnold discussion without including what's gone on the last couple of weeks. And who knows what goes on next year? Is O'Connell definitely back? Remember those weird trade rumors that came up a few weeks ago? The question about Darnold and J.J. McCarthy and the quarterback position. Offensive line, too, got to figure that part out. A lot to figure out all of a sudden for a team that looked like it was going to be the 1 seed at one point.
Yeah, a fascinating offseason ahead for the fans in Minnesota. We keep notes on your rankings. The Broncos, do you remember where you had them early on in the season?
24, maybe?
Okay, all right. They were in that range. They were a bottom 5 team.
Oh.
At the beginning of the season. How surprised are you? And by the way, speaking of perception, the perception of a Vikings team and where they sit and the Denver Broncos, who are 3 spots behind, it feels so different heading into next season. But I think there's some respect that we got to give Sean Payton's squad.
Absolutely. We find out after the game, Bo Nix was playing through a transverse process in his back. That's a broken bone, right? That's something that he's got to get looked at and monitored this offseason, possibly fixed. So, if you take that into consideration, there's a rookie quarterback who used his legs well, threw for 29 touchdowns, kind of steadied the ship. There's all those questions with Russ and the future of the quarterback position last year. Those have now been answered, right? Nix was by far not a slam dunk choice by any means, at least in terms of around the league. But, he's proven Sean Payton right. That defense, except for the playoff game, I didn't think they played that well on that side of the ball, but much better defensively. They still have some things to figure out. Who's going to lead the backfield? Can they keep this pass rush proficiency up next year? Still have to deal with the Chiefs and the Chargers and a tough AFC West too, but hard not to love the direction they're going in. I still think it might take another year, another off season, another year to kind of get into that upper group yet. But again, they were not a team headed in the right direction before Sean Payton arrived, and that's definitely changed.
Denver's ahead of schedule. I would make an argument that the Chargers in year one with Harbaugh also ahead of schedule. I think the way that they lost this game against the Texans gives us a little bit of a sour taste heading into this offseason. But how high is this ceiling? Because it felt like some of the questions we had about offense really started to solve themselves as the season unfolded, especially late in the year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can't take one playoff game and say, well, Herbert threw 4 picks, right? He's toast, and this passing game is never going to improve and all that. There were some real issues in that game that caused Justin some problems. He made his own mistakes. Obviously, there was a drop that led to a pick too. But these were issues that were sort of slowly bubbling up throughout the season. Jim Harbaugh said, we are going to be built through the offensive line. At times, that unit looked really good. But for the most part, I think they underwhelmed. That unit's got to be addressed. Jim's going to make that a priority. Probably love to add more receiver help as well. Maybe another tight end, a running back. We didn't see the run game pop as much. And then you've got some aging pass rushers and some holes in the secondary too. So all of a sudden, there's a lot to figure out. The Chargers, this is just fact, they played a pretty easy or, let's say, forgivable schedule, I think, this year, and they exploited it. Good for them. Jim did a great job cleaning this team up. But still say there's a lot more to do in the offseason, and they got to start with some of those problem areas.
Speaking of direction, there's some teams right now trying to figure out who's going to be leading the charge. You got some head coaching vacancies. Just to attach a ranking to the teams that are looking for head coaches, the Cowboys at 21, which is kind of a weird thing to say with the McCarthy situation. At 23, it's the Bears, 25, the Saints, 26, it's the Jets, 27, the Jags, and the Raiders at 28. Not included in the list is the New England Patriots, who are sitting at 29. They went one and done with Gerard Mayo. In like 2 minutes, they hire Mike Vrabel. Just that presence alone, are we going to be talking about them? I don't know. They were 29th at the end of the season in your power rankings. Where can we start thinking about this team heading into next season?
Yeah, it'll be in my final power rankings at the end of this, after the Super Bowl, when I kind of reset the board and the teams that have hired head coaches, have made some personnel decisions. I'm going to adjust those, right? Patriots will probably be on the rise. I think a little teaser, Mike. That's what we call it here in the industry. Look at Kraft. He looks happy for the first time in months. I mean, look, the Jared Mayo thing. Even he had to admit it wasn't working. The locker room agreed. There was a lot of issues there. I think we'll hear more about that in the next couple months. Mike Vrabel is not a panacea, but I think he's going to be an even better head coach than he was the first time in Tennessee. And he was darn good there, right? Did it plateau a little bit at the end? Did things run stale? Yes, but I think some of the issues that led to his ouster there are things that are going to help him in his second go around as a head coach. Plus, he's got buy-in, right? Everybody knows this is Mike Vrabel. He played for Bill Belichick, but he does things his own way too. So accountability is going to be big. I think they're going to do the right thing and surround Drake May with the right kind of talent. I don't think Mike's just going to sort of slam the run game into people every week. He knows he has a special quarterback, and I think he's going to help make this team a lot better.
I think one of the most intriguing jobs, I won't say destination job, or however it was characterized to Troy Aikman on Monday night, who gave his take on what the Dallas Cowboys job really is and giving autonomy to a head coach to allow them to be themselves. I think he questioned whether or not that can happen in Dallas. Is this, even from just a football perspective, the roster and where it is right now, is this a good job?
It's an interesting job, right? That's a good cop-out. That's a good way to sort of sidestep the question. Obviously, you're having to deal with some pretty tough teams. The Commanders are going to have Daniels for years to come. The Eagles look set up for success too. The Giants are going to have a high draft pick this year, maybe a quarterback. So you got an uphill climb in the division. You have an aging quarterback who's had multiple season-ending injuries, making a lot of money, taking up a big chunk of the cap. What happens with Dak Prescott now that McCarthy's not there? Does he get moved? Is he still part of the picture? Obviously we've heard some big names in the early going and who might end up there or whatnot. It's not clear what direction they're going to go, but I suspect that letting the talks with McCarthy subside, they had a plan, and they probably had a backup plan in mind for where they wanted to go. If they did, that tells me this job is still desirable. You still have sort of deep pockets and unlimited support for this team. So I think it's a good job, but it obviously comes with its traps, no question about it.
Yeah, and by the way, how different is this job if they were winning games this year and Dak Prescott was completely healthy. By the way, Cooper Rush played really well. I'm not saying, look, there was definitely some wins that were there, but if they get some wins at home, which was a major struggle for them earlier this season, and Dak is healthy, I don't know. I think we're looking at this job maybe a little bit differently, and I think it's probably, from a football perspective, leveled up from some of the vacancies that are open right now. But there's a lot of potential, obviously, with some of these other teams. I would circle the Chicago Bears as one of those squads, and even the Jags maybe with the roster that they have in place. Eric, this was a blast, man. Always good working with you. Let's keep in mind, we'll continue to analyze all of these teams. I hope everyone enjoys the divisional weekend. We will see you next week for another edition of Power Rankings.